a special edition this evening because of the developments today. Prime Minister, the Right Honorable Dr. Keith Mitchell, who's also responsible for national security, he addressed the nation at 1 o'clock today, and he announced Emergency Powers COVID-19 Regulations 2020. And that is in keeping with all that has been happening in Grenada and across the world for the last 2 months. Our guest this evening, Attorney General Darshan Ramdani, he's joining us via Skype. And we have in studio with us Mr. Jerry Edwin. Hopefully we could have Mr. Ruggles Ferguson also joining us on Skype a little later in the program. Social distancing means that we can't have too many guests in the studio, so we have to run with whatever baton is handed to us. Mr. Edwin, it's good to have you.
As well. Good night to you, Ms. Campbell.
And I'm certain you want to say good night to the viewers and listeners.
And of course to the viewers, naturally. Good night, and I hope everyone is in good health and observing the latest regulations that were issued by the Prime Minister.
And how did you get to the studio? You should have been locked up maybe?
No, I waved to my friends, the policemen. I showed them my special pass, and they said to me that I could proceed. Okay,
so you have a special pass.
Yes.
So the regulations that were announced today, they're effective from today. They came into effect at 6 o'clock. They expired 6 p.m. on April the 1st, 2020. And one of the things that has been mentioned in the regulations is the restrictions on freedom of movement. And just so that we can give you a synopsis, a curfew has been imposed from 7 o'clock this evening, and it goes until 5 o'clock in the morning. And as mentioned, that is effective today until the 1st of April. It is for 21 days, so there's a technicality. I think the minister did explain that it will be reviewed after April the 1st, but it is for 21 days. And so there are exceptions, and it's a lot to go through. So we're hoping that Mr. Ramdani will be able to take us through the regulations. Mr. Edwin will help us to clarify some points, because we have been inundated here at the GBN by a lot of calls today with people trying to clarify who could move where, who can move at what point. So, Mr. Edwin, thank you so much again for coming.
Welcome.
And we will go through, we have some slides, and we will go through the regulations clause by clause. Mr. Ramdani, are you there with us? All right, he will be joining us shortly. So, freedom of movement every day from 5 o'clock to 7 shall be exercised in accordance with these regulations, and these regulations shall not apply in the case of medical emergencies. So let's set the record straight. If there's a medical emergency, then the regulations will not apply. So going to the first clause, all businesses and offices may continue their business operations by allowing their employees to work remotely from home utilizing virtual means unless they are permitted to work under Regulation 5 or are designated as being essential workers. So,
to Regulation 5, there is a subset, Ms. Campbell, of businesses and exceptions. Now, this is overly broad. I don't know if Mr. Ramdani is with us yet, because really this is the province of the Attorney General and the authorities of the state. But from my lay perspective, as I read here, there are some exceptions. It says that every non-essential establishment of business shall remain closed except for the following. And then we have an enumeration of several businesses. Doctors' offices, pharmacies, medical supply establishments, gas stations from 6 a.m. to 5 p.m. I'm concerned about the first list of accepted businesses that may remain open. It says wholesale or retail grocery stores and commercial bakeries. And it says the first 2 shopping hours, I assume that means between 6 and 7 a.m.
That would be between 6 and 8 because the first 2 hours. But you might have a business opening at 8 o'clock, like one of the grocery stores.
So that's precisely the point. So that means between 8 and 10, grocery stores are open, are reserved for seniors, disabled persons, and essential workers. It means that if mom has to go to the grocery store first thing in the morning, she has to wait until after 10. Or is that what it means? It says reserved for seniors, disabled persons, and essential workers. So the general public is barred from wholesale or retail grocery stores and bakeries for the first 2 hours of this curfew. Is that what you read this to me?
Well, let's see if we have Mr. Ramdani on the line. I believe he was trying to get us on the line until we could have the Skype sorted out. So let's have him call us on 440-1252. Let's have Mr. Ramdani call us on 440-1252. So we will get back to that. Let's go through the regulations again. Where a business is unable to continue its business operations by its employees working remotely from home, the business shall cease its operations. So you have some businesses, if we look at the United States, some of the call centers are saying that their businesses can work remotely from home, and if that can't happen, the business shall cease its operations. And it goes on to look at the state-owned enterprises, statutory bodies. All members of the public service shall work remotely from home except as otherwise directed by the Secretary to the Cabinet. Where the Secretary to the Cabinet directs that specified public officers attend work, the government shall take reasonable steps to ensure safe transport of the public officers and they are to comply with the physical distancing protocols. And the court shall remain accessible, shall adhere to physical distancing protocols, and the persons employed within the public service shall work remotely from home as far as reasonably practicable.
Well, I can tell you that for the courts, the High Court may be continuing to hear bail applications only. But just before I came in, I understand that a couple of the justices have decided that they are going to shut down until further notice. Now, you know, the most essential court in Grenada is the Magistrates Court. The work done by the Magistrates Court is, I always say this, it's a superhuman endeavor. Today and for the last 2 weeks, Chief Magistrate St. Louis has been holding bail applications directly from the prison using Skype technology. And we've had the great cooperation of the Commissioner of Prisons and a social worker there, Mr. Stroud. Together with the Chief, Mr. Williams, they bring the inmates to a special room. And the lawyers are in the courtroom, Magistrates Court number 1. That's the only court that is operational now.
Okay, so we're on legal matters, and I believe we have Mr. Ramdani on with us. So let's see if we can get him. Mr. Ramdani, are you there? Mr. Ramdani?
Very well, as pleased as one can be to join you in circumstances such as these. Yes, I've been listening to a bit of what Mr. Edwin has been saying. Let me say this.
Yes,
shall I weigh in on that immediately?
Go ahead.
Yes. As you see, the regulations passed in relation to the emergency proclamation made by the Governor General intends to, well, the underlying purpose of the declaration of emergency is essentially to curtail and contain, identify and isolate, as our Prime Minister has said, the virus so that the medical authorities can deal with this issue so we can minimize spread. In relation to the court system, the way the regulation is drafted, it contemplates that the courts will continue to be accessible, that for important matters will be heard, such as bail applications. We were speaking with the registrar this afternoon of the High Court. I also spoke with Mr. Teddy St. Louis, the Chief Magistrate, inquiring how they intended to operate within this context, the latter especially. Let me start with the registrar of the High Court, the discussion we have had, and I've also spoken to the bar president. It is our hope that in accordance with the directions given by the Chief Justice, the practice direction, which was recently also published by Gazette, is that we will have some hearings by Skype where those can be facilitated. For instance, where they can be done by paper, we will do that. Some will be done by Skype. In fact, early this week, our chambers, the Attorney General's chambers, dealt with a matter on Skype with Justice Glasgow. We are contemplating even situations where the judges can work from home these discussions will be had, and I'm hoping that that can be accommodated for some matters. We are in a period of emergency, and this 21 days, I'm hoping, will see us all through safely. And in the meantime, we can still do some work in the courts which are important and necessary as well. There's a balance to be struck. In relation to the magistrates' court, I must inform you and the public that only this week as well, we published the prison video link rules. So what Mr. Edwin is speaking about, and I'm glad he has mentioned that, is that this has given statutory authority to the magistrates to be able to communicate or actually have hearings done, some kinds of hearing, not all kinds. You wouldn't have trials from the prison by way of video link. Not unless, of course, well, in rare circumstances, some hearings can be done where the defendants consent. But let me speak of the present moment. It is expected, in keeping with the underlying objective of the declaration of emergency, that there will be minimal travel. The courts will remain accessible as much as possible in the sense that people will be, we are coming up with a protocol for the court. And by morning, I expect with the magistrate indicating how they intend to operate, we can make this available to the lawyers and the bar on the way forward. But as Mr. Edwin is saying, bail applications will be done. Domestic violence applications, if those are brought to the court, they will be done as well. So the public will be shortly notified, I expect by mid-morning tomorrow, as to the protocol in relation to how this is done. Let me indicate, it was only on Sunday that we confirmed the case in relation to the confirmed case of the coronavirus in Grenada. And the Prime Minister and the government has acted very quickly. This is a very fluid process. We had to ensure that we balance things in a responsible manner. The aim here, again, is to stop the spread of the virus. We have seen what is happening around the world. I'm expecting my colleagues, I just was sitting here for a moment and I didn't know who else was on. I did hear Mr. Ferguson, who should have been on the show, Mr. Edwin. I'm glad that they're on the show today. This is an important moment in time that we need to provide clarity for the public. We need to provide clear guidance. And this is why I have decided to ensure I make myself available. I'm hoping again that I will be available tomorrow morning and throughout the week where necessary to provide this kind of clarity. I know there are some questions, concerns, there are various interpretations, various views of various aspects of the regulation and the proclamations. We are willing to inform and to share what we believe these things will do and provide you with clarity on the way forward.
Right.
I don't know what else have been discussed so far, but I will turn it back to you now to take it on.
Right. So, Mr. Ramdani, we want to thank you so much for elucidating those points. One of the questions that we have been continuously asked in the course of the afternoon is that of which businesses can remain open, which businesses can remain closed. And I believe there is a closure of business and exemptions category. If we can go through that, Mr. Edwin, you could help us here, and we'd have the Attorney General help us along. Every non-essential establishment or business shall remain closed except for the following.
Who else is on the program?
Yes, so the closure of businesses and exceptions. So who can remain open? Who should close their businesses?
Well, you would have noted closure of businesses set out, and I believe I must thank the media here. Throughout the afternoon after the Prime Minister's address, the media would have been sharing the slides which took out snippets of various important aspects of the regulation. These regulations try to, as much as possible, cover as much ground so that we could achieve the objective of minimizing travel. So what you're seeing here, that list at Regulation 5, are essentially what in a normal course of things would have been, some of them, most of them in a normal course, most of these would have been considered non-essential businesses, wholesale and retail grocery stores and commercial bakeries. If you see that there, that obviously in the normal world would not have been considered an essential service. Electricity, water, these would have been the kind of things, law enforcement. Again, when you go to the second one, we try to make this very clear. Doctors' offices, hospitals, and medical facilities, you would note that there is no time attached to the back, to this one here. If you look at A, you see wholesale, retail, grocery stores, commercial bakeries from 6 a.m. to 5 p.m. This contemplates that if the curfew ends at 5 a.m., that people will have to mobilize to get out of their houses, homes, and get to work. And so that contemplates that 1 hour period there. And then those stores will have to be closed at 5 p.m. again to facilitate people returning to their homes so that the curfew beginning at 7 p.m. can be observed. But when you get to the next one, you see doctors' offices, hospitals, or medical facilities. There is no time set out against that one. In other words, we are in a medical emergency. We are in a country-wide emergency related to a medical situation, related to a virus. And it would be illogical, absurd, if we were to attempt in any way to say hospitals would close at a particular time. That's ridiculous. So obviously,
Mr.
we wanted to make this clear.
Mr. Ramnani, so let's go through the listing and then we can come back to fine-tune some of the points. So doctors' offices, hospitals or medical facilities, pharmacies and medical supply establishments, and then you have a time for gas stations and hardware stores. Tell us about the gas stations and the hardware stores.
Again, you want to ensure that the underlying purpose of the proclamation of emergency and these regulations are achieved, which is to minimize the movement of people to facilitate the spread of the virus, so that the medical authorities can curtail, contain, isolate the virus, and so that they can deal with it and return us to a sense of normalcy. Gas stations, people will have between 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. to get to gas stations and fill up on their gas. And I expect that the general public will understand. I'm sure everybody's not driving on empty yesterday. There'll be some people driving on empty, I suppose, but there will be those who would have been close to empty. But there's no need for there to be any great rush. Tomorrow between 6 a.m. and 5 p.m., you can get to a gas station and you can fill up on your gas. And the next day, you will be able to do that. The next day, you'll be able to do that because it is recognized that some degree of economic activities are permissible under these regulations so that we don't grind completely to a halt. I have been listening and hearing to some comments coming from the public in relation that there have been calls for a total shutdown. If you realize, we all know, some countries in the world have taken the step of shutting down entirely, having people remain in their homes 24 hours. We believe in the Grenada context, in the Caribbean context, in the Grenada context, a responsible administration would not simply follow suit what other nations are doing. We have to tailor something to fit our circumstances and the level of risk that we believe exists. Our decisions were taken, the government's decisions were taken having regard to the medical and scientific information which was available and the predictions and the beliefs that arose from those decisions, that kind of information. Mm-hmm. And so there was a lot. Sorry.
Mr. Ramnani,
so I'm giving you the reason as to why
I want us to move on. I want us to move on through. I want us to move on as quickly as possible through the regulations and then come back to questions because we want to open the phone lines in a while. So I'm sorry to cut you there, but there's hardware stores from 6 a.m. to 5 p.m. Hardware stores from 6 a.m. to 5 p.m. The hotels, excluding any spas, so the hotels could open. You want to take us through this one, Mr. Edwin, the hotels?
Yes, as I read this, it seems like pretty much all businesses in Grenada can continue to operate, except that for those businesses where we have persons that congregate. We want to avoid the purpose of this regulation, and Mr. Ramdani may be able to clear it up. The purpose of the regulation appears to be to avoid as much physical contact between people as possible. So the hotel is open, but the restaurant is closed.
Right. So we could get a slide back up on,
Yes.
so that people could understand. Hotels,
Yes,
excluding any spas, gyms,
but as a matter of fact,
discotheques,
I think
restaurants therein. However, such restaurants may offer takeaway or room service. Let's dissect this. So the hotels could open, but you're excluding the spas. So you can't go to the spas, you cannot go to the gyms, you can't go to the discotheques, and you cannot go to the restaurants therein. However, they're saying the restaurants may offer takeaway or room service. Is that how we should interpret
Well,
it?
listen, I think as far as Grenadians are concerned, we're not going to hotels. We're staying home.
Right.
Right? But
May I address that?
and as a matter of fact, I think at this point, most of the hotels are closed anyway. Right? And
Restaurants could offer
I'm not going to go
takeaway
for my
service.
spa treatment anytime soon.
Right.
Right? But banks and credit unions, so yes, just take away for those that are open or room service.
Right. And if we could look at the slide again, we'd ask the producer to show the slide again. Banks, let's keep the slide there for a while.
Right.
Banks, credit unions, and money service businesses from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. Monday to Thursday, and 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. on Friday. So the banking sector will remain as
Yes,
is. Banks-
MoneyGram and so on, they will remain open.
Right. So let me ask Mr. Ramdani a question. Mr. Ramdani, if you're hearing us, I'm certain you are. People are asking, for instance, whether insurance companies should be classed under money service businesses, because they're thinking that they should be. We had a call today from an insurance agent saying that they feel that they fall under the money services business.
Yes.
So for example, if
The
someone
way
wants
this
to
is
renew
drafted,
their
this
car
contemplated
insurance.
that banks, of course, which are stated very clearly, and all other money services business. So anyone who is in the business of providing money services. Now, insurance company fall within a unique niche, taking in claims. It is not generally associated with the context of a money service business. Now, let me say at this point, I believe when you stop speaking to me, you turn off my mic. So I was trying to interject earlier. But that's a very good way to do it. That keeps us very ordered here, and that is important. Let me say
Not
this,
intentional.
that it is something which I have been saying, to the bar all of today after these regulations came out, and to other persons who have been calling me. My phone have been ringing, and I've been trying to provide clarity, hence the reason we are here, is that the regulations as drafted, we know from experience around the region and looking at this kind of this type of regulations and law, emergency regulations, these things, you will see situations where we will have to go back at it and readdress it.
Sure.
Now, we are prepared to listen to suggestions. As it is framed right now, I am of the view that it doesn't cover insurance business, but this is something we are willing to consider. Let us hear from the insurance company. They can contact me, I'm available, and we can have a discussion about this. We can tweak this. If you recall, the police commissioner has a power to make exceptions which are not present there. Today, I have had a number of calls. In fact, one of them related to caregivers for elderly persons, not in hospitals, not in residential facilities, simply people at home who have their old parent at home, and they have persons who are coming in to provide
Mr.
care for them. Now, the commissioner
take him on the
of
phone.
police is the one to exercise this discretion, but I would have thought that this is something he would consider of some merit if he were to have a request for such an exemption. In fact, I do intend to raise it with him, because we don't necessarily have to have a written application coming in from a person. If we are satisfied that the request is an authentic request and we get sufficient information, and so that the commissioner can be engaged in the process and apply his mind to it and decide that whether this is one of those. Remember, coming back to what Mr. Edwin just said, and I have been saying all along, the underlying purpose of these regulations, this emergency, is to keep people, not traveling, not mixing, not intermingling. But we have to recognize that there are going to be important things which we can facilitate, but yet at the same time achieve the objective that we are seeking. Yes, and this is very, very important.
Danny, we got that point. We got that point, and I want us to, before we turn around twice, the clock will tick away at us. So I want us to go through the slides so that we can cover these and then come back with explanations. So commercial ports and related businesses from 6 a.m. and we'd ask the producer to assist us with slides.
Tell me what
commercial ports and related businesses from 6 a.m. to 5 p.m. subject to any variation by the Ports Authority. And I think, Mr. Edwin, we've seen some of that already.
Yes, we have.
The airport. And we have the airports, the exceptions, commercial and courier flights.
So that means FedEx is still operational, as is Liat Air Courier Service, and some of the other
like Amerijet.
Amerijet, we're assuming is still open. But the carrier flights are not. Passenger flights. That's why they make it clear it's commercial courier flights only.
Right.
And essentials, that is as it relates to 10.1a. I think that speaks to, if I'm not correct.
Let's go through the slides and we'll get to 10.1a. So let's go back to let's ask the producer to take us back through the slides. So we have airports, commercial courier flights, drive-through or takeaway food vendors from 6 a.m. to 5 p.m. So these people are allowed. So we have it at airports.
KFC and Pizza Hut and so on will be open from 6 a.m. to 5 p.m.
Registered or bona fide fishermen and farmers engage in their business. So fishermen and farmers can continue. And the businesses that are licensed to provide security guard services. So the security guards could be allowed. They would not be stopped when they try to get to go to the various places.
But let me ask this about, I don't know if Mr. Ramdani can clarify L. That's 5L, Mr. Ramdani. When it says registered or bona fide fishermen and farmers engage in their business. For example, we run a farm. And what about the workers who have to travel to get to that farm?
Mr. Ramdani, can you clarify for us? We have farm workers.
Yes. Now, it would make nonsense in an interpretation if you say that a farmer can be engaged in their business and literally he has a farm of that extent which he cannot manage alone. So to make sense of this particular regulation, one would have to construe it to mean that this would include his workers. And again, the word bona fide there is important. You see, we are allowing people to engage in those activities which relate to certain crucial aspects, and at the same time ensure that they respect the social distancing protocols. And so farm is something which we as a policy matter, the fishermen and the farmers can engage in their activities. And to answer Mr. Edwin's question, and I suppose the public's question, is that those workers who are engaged by you, who are performing essential services on these farms, meaning you don't just bring somebody to the farm because he's your worker, you have to be doing something. And so I'm urging people to apply this provision or seek to use this provision in a sensible manner, in a practical manner that keeps the rest of Grenada safe, so that farmers know the persons they're bringing out, that the farmers can account for these people, and that they are coming to do something on the farm which is important and required within this time. The farmers themselves will put themselves at risk if they bring people for a social gathering. And remember, the regulations actually prohibit social gatherings of any kind. So these things are important. Laws, we have many books of laws. And Mr. Edwin practices in the criminal courts from time to time, and he knows how many people will break laws. Sometimes they say laws are put there and people will break laws. We are calling on these rules here that we have put in place will require a level of responsibility from the general public. Members of the public will need to understand that they have to be their brother's keepers, their sister's keeper, to ensure that we comply with these rules and regulations. The police department.
Let's stick a pin there. Let's stick a pin there and come back. Let's go to construction. All works of construction of any sort, apart from urgent plumbing, electrical, roof repairs, or other emergency repairs for a home or business shall cease as of 7 p.m. on March 25th. So, Mr. Edwin, you're saying that if somebody has been adding on an extra wing to your house, that must cease. Is that what that is saying?
Yes, I think this says that the only, as I understand it, Mr. Ramdani, that only emergency construction, that is to if your roof is flying off or there's a chance of an electrical fire or some emergency work to be done at home or business, then all construction work, that important 30% of our economy shall and must cease from the 25th day of March, from today. The construction work must be urgent. Plumbing, electrical, roof repairs. So if a pipe is busted and the water is running out of your PVC, or there's a chance of an electrical fire, or your roof has blown off, if it's nothing of the sort, then no construction work should occur, because you understand in this kind of work, there necessarily requires people to be close to each other. Yes, and if the objective is to keep people further apart, then I think this regulation clearly makes sense.
All right, let's move on to shelter in place. Before we take a commercial break, there has been this, everywhere you hear shelter in place, and we'd ask the producer to assist us with the slide, shelter in place. And shelter in place is saying that every person shall remain, let's move on. Every person shall remain confined to their place of residence to avoid contact outside of their family, except essential workers who report to work, workers required to work under Regulation 4 or 5, which was addressed already for essential travel to the doctor, the grocery store, the bank, the credit union, money service business or pharmacy, or to refuel. So shelter in place. Would you like to explain the concept shelter in place for us, Mr. Edwin?
I don't know. When we think of shelter, we often think of a physical cover or being in a confined space. In the law, we think of shelter as, we use a term called a curtilage. The curtilage is the confines of your property. So it could be without a fence, it could be just your yard, even without a gate.
I think it did say including the yard.
Including the yard.
Inclusive of the yard.
Well, shelter in space. This is,
in place.
Again, I think the language has to be tweaked a little bit to say your house or your yard.
Yes, it does say so. In putting this together to make it less wordy, we did remove that. Mr. Ramdani wants to clarify. Mr. Ramdani.
Well, let's read the whole thing so that Mr. Edwin can be very clear, so we can tell everybody what it means. It says here, every person shall remain confined to their place of residence, including of their yard space, to avoid contact outside of their family. That's what it says. So the heading, when you read the heading, you get to the substantive provision, you really see what this is doing. This is telling you stay at home, stay in your yard, except, and then it goes through who can come out. Yes, and who can come out are all those persons we covered earlier in 4 and 5, and then we have a number of other things there for essential persons as well. Yes, so it goes through that whole list. So this is not sheltering under a piece of galvanized somewhere. This is in your home, in your yard. You're to remain there unless you are covered by one of the exceptions. And this is one of the most crucial aspects of to achieve the underlying objective of this proclamation of national emergency, and these regulations to flesh it out, to explain what needs to be done, what restrictions are being imposed on various rights, because we have a national emergency. And so this one is very important for persons to understand. Yes?
Okay.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ramdani, for clarifying the point. And this is Beyond the Headlines on GBN Television. We're looking at the regulations governing the state of emergency, which was declared today by Prime Minister, Minister of National Security, the Right Honorable Dr. Keith Mitchell. We will take a commercial break and we'll be right back. When we come back, we will examine the essential worker and who is covered under essential services. And we'd also look at the restrictions on social activities. Beyond the Headlines, we'll be right back after this.
Lucozade. Day and night, yeah, we're on this. I know you want this. Come on and taste the energy. Day and night, live your Lucozade life. Live your Lucozade life. Come taste the energy.
Good vibes only. Lucozade. Taste the energy.
Get high making money moves with the NLA's new Aces High Scratch game with 4 chances to win. Beat the dealer's card to win the prize shown. Reveal an A symbol. And just like that, you are automatically a winner. Scratch away to win the top prize of $10,000. Win easy with Scratch. Must be 18 or older to play.
I'm a winner. You are winner. We are winners. Winners.
It's the big one. Grenada. Imagine winning $25,000 and up to 6 times by scratching just 1 little ticket. Get your triple cash scratch tickets for a chance to live your best life. Win easy with Scratch. For just $3, match any of your numbers to any of the winning numbers and win the prize shown for that number. Reveal a money back symbol and win the prize instantly. Triple cash scratch. In stores now. Must be 18 or older to play.
Cause I'm a winner. From the moment that I get up, I'm feeling right.
A pleasant evening to everyone. Welcome to the National Lotteries Authority's Lotto Draw number 3078 for today, Wednesday, March 25th, 2020. I am Anisha Charles. With me this evening is Ms. Priscilla Barry from PKF Accountants and Business Advisors, whose purpose is to ensure that this show is conducted in an accountable manner, and the game balls with industry standards and in a way tampered with. At this time, you should have tickets at hand because we're about to play for a jackpot of $166,000. But first, your free ticket letter. Good luck. Your free ticket letter for this evening is check your tickets. Your free ticket letter is O as in odd. Let's proceed for 5 winning numbers. Good luck. First up for this evening is check your tickets in the meantime. First number up is 7. Second number. Second number is 11. Third number up. Third number is 8, followed by 3. Fifth and final number. Final number is 18. Let's recap those numbers. Check your tickets. First number up is 7. The second, 11. Third, 8, followed by 3. Fifth and final is 18. So that's 077 11 11 088 033 and 1818. Your free ticket letter for this evening is O as in odd. Congratulations to all the winners of this evening's Lotto Draw. Lotto, play and win a lot. Dear NLA agents and players, subject to recent developments regarding Grenada's measures taken in regards to the fight against COVID-19, the NLA hereby advises the general public that in the interest of employees and the public's safety, the following operational changes has been hereby put into immediate effect from after the evening draws of Wednesday, 25th March 2020. All lottery sales at the NLA sub-offices and other authorized sales agents throughout the Tri-Island State and lottery draws are suspended until further notice. Therefore, all lottery tickets bought for future draws will be valid for whenever the draws are reopened, and all redemptions.
It's new, innovative and classy, and a cut above the rest. Your one-stop shop for bathtubs, kitchenette, customized doors and windows, and even a new paint job. We also sell quartz and solid surface countertops. At M&N Hardware, we offer best prices, excellent service, efficiency, and reliability. Visit us at Dusty Highway, Grandin, St. George, or call telephone number 440-6757. M&N Hardware, from foundation to roof. Let's build together.
Why not stay in, turn off the alarm clock, and sleep some more on your perfect mattress from Quartz? For the widest range of mattresses from the world's best brands, the best value guaranteed. Shop today and let our sleep experts help you to decide on the best option to suit your needs. At Quartz, we don't just sell mattresses, we're offering you the best night's sleep. So, sleep in a little on your new mattress from Quartz. Quartz, bringing value, home.
Welcome back to Beyond the Headlines. It's a special edition as we are examining the regulations outlined today by the government of Grenada as it among a limited state of emergency. And in case you are just joining us or you joined us a little late, just to remind you that we have live on Skype the Attorney General, Mr. Darshan Ramdhani. In studio, we have Attorney Jerry Edwin, and joining us on the phone, also via Skype, Ruggles Ferguson. He is an attorney as well. Mr. Ferguson, good evening and welcome. And just, Mr. Ferguson, we're seeing you there, so I'm waving to you good night. Good. So we'd have to just get the audio up. While we get the audio rectified there,
yes.
Mr. Edwin, you were telling me, let's go back in studio. You were telling me about you got your special COVID haircut.
Yes, I told my barber that I want to be well protected, and he said, "Well, I'm going to fix you up." And I got home. My wife wondered, "What did I do?" And I had to tell her, "This is the new haircut for this season."
So explain the significance of the haircut.
Well, I guess it's just a general state of cleanliness. So the hair has to be barely on the scalp. I don't know if Mr. Ramdhani has one too, but it looks like Mr. Ferguson has one as well. This is a COVID-19 haircut.
Well, I thanks for alerting me. So
Yeah.
what's happening to us women? Because
maybe you're in the exempted class.
In the exempted class?
Yes.
Mr. Ferguson and Mr. Ramdhani, you have the COVID-19 haircut?
Well, I think they are both ahead of me. I have a little extra. But I'm sure many will be joining Mr. Edwin soon.
I can't see Mr. Edwin, so I don't know what it looks like, but I hardly need a haircut myself.
Well, we see about that. I don't think I could put the scissors on my head and enter my house. My husband may ask me where I'm going and what happened. I left with something and came back without it. Go and find it. So that's something to be considered. We have to put a little light moment to all the serious things that are happening. So pardon us while we did that. So Ruggles, we want to thank you so much. We know you've had a busy evening. You had a class. You were lecturing and you asked your students for some time to come and be with the nation as we go through these. So Ruggles, because you have fresh legs in the race, let's go through the essential workers and who are categorized for the purpose of this legislation as essential workers, and we'll also ask the producer to assist us. Ruggles, let's take us through that.
Okay, and that is at regulation. Well, the regulations.
Regulation 7, Ruggles,
describe or define what is an essential worker. And just let me get the particular section that we're referring to.
7.3.
International travel. And that is what? 7?
7.3.
7.3. Okay. Okay. Okay, 7.3. Yes, actually, okay. And that's under the rubric shelter in place. So 7 says every person shall remain confined to their place of residence to avoid contact outside of their family. And one of the exceptions is for essential travel to the doctor, grocery store, bank, credit union, money services, business, or pharmacy, or to refuel.
Ruggles, if you're hearing me, we need to go to the listing of essential. So let's go to 7.3, I believe. You see,
that's our subsection 2, Ruggles.
Okay.
So the essential workers. Let's take us through the listing of the essential workers.
Right. So, okay. So the essential workers under 7.3, you have the Royal Grenada Police Force, Her Majesty's Prison, the National Insurance Board, the Department of Social Services, the Department of Environmental Health Services, the Custom and Excise Division, the Accountant General's Division, the Inland Revenue Division, Waste Disposal and Sanitation Companies, any hospital or healthcare, medical, residential care establishment or facility, the Airports Authority and Ports Authority, and essential officers of any water, electricity, or other sector encompassing, and that includes the provision of electronic communications, including print and electronic media, and any other officer or category of officers as directed by the Secretary to the Cabinet. So what we see from this list, they are all persons connected with the service industry. And it's not all essential services as you may ordinarily define as electricity, water, police, doctors, and so. It now includes like social workers because this is a health emergency. So essential worker would include social services. And of course, you see the aspect for revenue. Of course, in a period like this, the objective is to that revenue in some form is collected to be able to provide whatever means of social support in the period. So Accountant General's Division, the Customs and Excise, and you have the Inland Revenue, all central institutions for the collection of revenue. Another category, of course, and we understand the importance in times of crisis, is waste disposal and sanitation companies. We do not always appreciate their importance, but sometimes you have situations where if the sanitation workers don't work for 2 days, then it's chaos, a crisis of another kind in the city. So you have that category, and of course the airport and the ports. Because despite the fact that the airport is closed and the ports are closed, but there seem to be some flights and provision made, which is something we have to be very careful about, because I understand, for example, there are some like Air Canada and 1 or 2 other airlines, you still have passengers entering and leaving the country. So while the closure of the airport is critical and is not inconsistent with what many of the other countries are doing, but we have to be extremely careful that persons who come into the country at this point don't facilitate the spread of what we are trying to avoid. Because if you notice, with all of the countries in the Caribbean, there seems to be some link with the United Kingdom and the United States for most of them. I understand the St. Kitts announced today 2 cases, and it's traced back to persons coming from the United States. So we have to be very careful, despite the fact that there is a lockdown, but there are still provisions where you can, facilitate the spread of the virus.
Let me weigh in on this, please.
Yes,
sure, go ahead.
You must.
If you notice, Regulation 5, yes, speaks at 5.1H and I. You would notice that airports are one of the accepted categories, but I really says airports subject to regulation 10.1a. So when you get to 10.1a, what you see is that there's a restriction on international travel.
Correct.
Yes?
Correct. You have to
In
clarify
fact,
that.
there were earlier pronouncements during the week of planes coming in empty and taking out passengers or people going back to their homes in other countries and jurisdictions. So that was happening. They were coming in empty. Now, if you notice 10.1a, it actually says this. I don't know if you have a slide for it, but this is what it says. Except with the prior written permission of the Airports Authority, all airports, including private airports and fixed-base operations, shall be closed to incoming international flights carrying any visitor. Now, there's a reason why there's an exception created, because we may need medical doctors,
Correct.
we may need nurses, and we have been having assistance, I understand, of this sort going around the world. Cuba has been sending medical personnel to assist in jurisdictions. And so it is important for us to have that ability so we can exercise that power in a very rapid way to say, well, yes, we can do this. This is going to be exercised. As I had said earlier before Mr. Ferguson joined us, was that the underlying objective of this is to minimize the opportunity for people to come into contact with each other so that we can curtail, contain, identify and isolate the virus so that medical practitioners, in the words of the Prime Minister, medical practitioners and the medical authorities can do their work and so we can return to normalcy. So yes, Mr. Ferguson is right, and I am glad that members of the bar are here tonight with me speaking to the public on this matter. These provisions, there is some explanation required because it's quite a bit, but I'm glad that Mr. Ferguson has captured the essence of this, and he has identified the concern which he has, which is really addressed by the regulation itself. So this is a matter which we give careful thought to.
Let me just go back and ask.
Yes, sorry, go on.
Let's go back to a point. We've had some concerns expressed by media workers, and I actually have someone asking here, can your guest speak to the section that talks about the media? 731. I understand some media practitioners are asking questions. So some members of the GBN staff were very nervous because people may think that we work from 8 to 4, but we don't. Even while the news is going on, we have members of the news team still here and making their way home. And some members of staff were worried that they may get arrested on the way home.
You mean 73L?
L, sorry. I said I am sorry.
Yes.
So for members of the media,
3-1.
can you clarify what obtains? And we have members of staff who are to come in at 5 o'clock in the morning, for instance. What should happen?
Mr. Ferguson, would you like to go or should I?
No, you can proceed, AG.
I thought this was rather clear, but let me make it clear that the media is recognized to be an essential worker. All persons working with the media are essential workers, and so they would be allowed to come in at 5 o'clock in the morning. Yes, these are essential workers. Yes, and so they would have the right to travel and to move about doing their work. Let me say this: the purpose of the regulation and the essential clothing these persons with the status of an essential worker is not so that they can travel about to do anything else but to do the work of the media. So, and again, I would urge even the media that if you have persons who may not be required on a particular day to attend your workplace, then the media should consider allowing them to remain at home and not simply turning up to and putting social distancing protocols at risk. So to answer your question in brief again, yes, all the workers of the media, the journalists, the cameramen, the technical facilitators, the person running the teleprompter, if there's one doing the sound, these persons are considered essential workers in the media. The media is a very important aspect of governance. And in this emergency, it is recognized that the media is very, very important for us to ensure that the population continues to have to be informed in a timely manner. So this is very crucial, and that was a very important question. Thank you for that.
Thank you so much, Attorney General, for that. Let's go on to education and religious instruction.
Just coming briefly here, because what is critical is that all essential workers, 7.3, shall at all times carry personal identification. It refers to personal identification, but in my view, the personal identification needs to connect the person, not just identifying who the person is, but connecting the person to the particular essential service. So one point that's borne in mind by employers, that if people don't carry sufficient personal identification that connects them to the particular service, then that is something that may need to be fleshed out in the interim period. Because if I say I am AB, just AB, and my address is Trublo, then it must say AB employed by what this requires to avoid problems is to ensure that you say AB of the particular media house, or that AB works with a particular entity that is excluded from the particular restrictions here. So that is just something that probably should be borne in mind.
Yes, and I'm very grateful for that, Mr. Ferguson, because media practitioners and media personnel, you have a responsible role. These essential workers have a responsible role, because law enforcement the police will be out. They will be attempting to ensure that these regulations are complied with, and they will be asking questions if they see you out and about.
Mr. Ramdani,
again,
on that
it is
point,
hoped that this will, the members of the public will facilitate and cooperate so that we can have an ordered execution of this process. Yes, but I'm grateful for that, Mr. Ferguson. You've hit it spot on.
On Mr. Ferguson's point, I think that employers should, in fact, they can just issue a letter on their letterhead saying that Odette Campbell is an employee of GBN, and that person, because I don't know if there are media cards issued, even policemen, not. I think that it's important if the employer can issue a letter on their letterhead saying this person works with this organization as a bank teller, right? And that person can then carry this letter, because banks don't, of course, always have identification cards. A lot of these institutions, let's say an insurance company, may not have an identification. I think, for example, of the officers in 7.1 or 7I, it says waste disposal and sanitation companies. And I must say I'm personally pleased to see these essential workers referred to as officers. We often think of the people driving on the back of these trucks as we call them names that are not exactly reflective of how important they are to the environment. So maybe if there's a letter that can connect, because these fellows have to travel to meet to the base where the trucks are located, either in Grand Roy or Guelph or Victoria or River Road. And so if the employer can have a letter that they can carry, Mr. Ramdani, I think it would ease the free flow of these persons and not cause any bottleneck in the system and what we're trying to do.
Okay, so
thank you, Mr. Edwin. I think the employers are listening, and some of them will be listening. We'll have to continue
6 minutes
to spread this message.
So we only have 6 minutes remaining. So, gentlemen, I think we need to speed it up. Let me ask the producer to assist us with education and religious instruction, and we can't belabor too many points, but let's try and get the public to understand. So we're moving on to the slide that says education and religious instruction, and the provisions for education and religious instruction is that all religious and educational places of instruction or worship shall remain closed. Who would like to take that? Ruggles, you'd like to take that?
Well, I think it's clear that in terms of the whole objective of the regulations, the primary objective is to prevent gatherings. And of course, you have gatherings you have many educational institutions, many churches. And essentially what it says is, listen, all these places shall remain closed, and you do it through. You use electronic or virtual means, whether Facebook, YouTube, or any of these electronic platforms, but no gatherings.
Right.
What
it says individual attendance at a place of... Sorry?
Is individual attendance at a place of worship for private individual prayer while maintaining physical distancing. So it doesn't prevent an individual from going to a place of worship, but notice it refers to individual attendance, and maybe at the time you may have more than one individual there, and if that is so, then you maintain the physical distancing. So I believe it is clear the general theme is that even for religious worship, and you have the experiences in Italy, that these gatherings facilitate the spread of the virus. So use electronic means. Simply
right, let's move on to the next slide. Restriction activities. No person shall host or attend a private party which includes any person from outside of the immediate household or the house of the occupant. That is the following slide. No person. So that is self-explanatory. A recreational or competitive sporting event.
Yes. And
a wedding. Yeah, let's go to the wedding, which hosts 10 or more persons other than the bride, the bridegroom, official witnesses, and the marriage officer. A banquet, ball, or reception. Any social event.
I think in the Grenadian context, that means all these events are going to be put on hold. I don't know any funeral that has 10 persons in it. So I think this is going to, people would want to put this on hold.
Those are very stiff ones, well, especially funerals, and attention needs to be paid on, that would be 9G. A funeral except 10 members of the immediate family. So it actually not only speaks to numbers, but it also defines who should attend. 10 members of the immediate family and at least one officiant and essential mortuary staff. So essentially, that is saying that funerals are basically over, or if the funerals must take place in this period, which I think most the undertakers prefer to deal with these things as quickly as possible. But that might be a tough one in the context of the Grenadian culture, to just have 10 members of the immediate family present at the funeral. So, I mean, that probably more than anything else goes to show that the extent of these restrictions, and they are not inconsistent, I must say, as tough as it may seem. But I saw is it Canada? I know in Jamaica, the number was 20. And these are countries much bigger than ours. But 10 is certainly tight. And it will be tough on families to really bring into practice that one.
Okay, so we have a question coming in via WhatsApp. Let's entertain this question. Somebody on WhatsApp is asking. I have a question for the panel. My understanding is that banks, etc., would be operational. In that case, customers should be free to visit these places. Would there be a costing by security personnel or persons traveling to these places? So for instance, based on the restrictions, you're telling people to shelter in place, but you're opening the banks. So as a member of the public, I don't work anywhere, I'm not an essential worker. Should security officers be telling me I can't come, or should the police be asking me what's my business? And if I say I'm going to the bank, should I be accosted or stopped?
Well, I think not. I mean, clearly the restrictions are about, if you look at it, it says that wherever people gather, they have to be at a certain distance away from each other. And one would expect if the bank is open or if the supermarket is open, notwithstanding the provision against shelter in place, you've got to go out and do your business, do so, and return home. So I don't think that it's, to the person who asked the question, it means that we are all restricted only to our homes. These institutions are open. Use them, keep within a certain distance of each other, and then return home. Don't mingle, just return home.
Okay, so let's move quickly along. The next slide that we would have had dealt with restriction on international travel. I think we can just scheme through these because we had...
on this issue of international travel, I had heard earlier, Mr. Ramdani, that if a person is a Grenadian, that they could return home. I think I heard someone say this, I don't know if it was the Prime Minister, that Grenadians are allowed to come in from whichever country, because it's subsection C of the restriction on international travel says no visitor shall be permitted to enter. So does that mean that if you're a Grenadian, you can come back home, although you are coming from a country like the UK where there's a massive outbreak, or the United States or Canada? I think subsection C should say no one shall be permitted to enter and disembark for any reason, including transmitting through the state of Grenada, with the exception, as you mentioned earlier, of medical personnel and diplomats and so on.
Mr. Ramdani, can you help us here?
If you notice, you see it speaks of visitors. And that must be contradicted or contrasted with a Grenadian person. If a Grenadian national or a Grenadian citizen is intending to return to Grenada, well, they would have a right to enter. We have protocols that have been set up in place before these regulations to deal with this.
No, wait, Mr. Ramdani, I need to stop you for a minute because this is very clear. This is very important. So, are you saying that a Grenadian, right now we do not have a global testing protocol? For example, in 9/11, as you recall, a person, post 9/11, a person cannot get on an airplane without being screened. I don't know that in the global system we have now, which has completely broken down, whether people are being pre-screened before they get on airplanes. It seems that they are tested when they arrive in country. So a Grenadian who who is coming from the UK, who may have contacted this disease, which we know is asymptomatic. You can look well, don't have a temperature, and you're carrying this disease. That Grenadian can now come into our airport where we don't have screenings and self-quarantine. Is that what we're saying?
Well, I will answer you in a moment, Mr. Edwin. Let me ask you a question so I can have it clear in my mind how you are considering this. What would you recommend that we do to that Grenadian?
That Grenadian ought to stay in the country where they are, where they are right now, and don't bring the disease home.
Perhaps Mr. Ferguson may want to weigh in on the constitutional aspect of this. Mr. Ferguson, can you join us there?
Well, again,
I would like to hear your view on this.
Yes, I'm happy that you raised that, because that is where the discussion should really start. I'm not too sure what went on before, because I joined late.
This is the first time this point is being raised.
Right.
It's the first time, yes.
Under the Constitution, Section 12 of the Constitution, it provides for freedom of movement. But the very Constitution, Section 17, provides for declarations of emergency.
Correct.
Because no freedom is absolute. So correct. You can restrict freedom in the context of defense, public safety, public health, public morality, and so. And of course, in this instance, it will be a public health consideration. And it empowers the state to take certain emergency measures.
Like these
that
regulations.
Essentially suspend the rights. And the point that Jerry is making, I think, is an important point. Is actually being lived out right now with the Trinidad experience and the Barbadians, the Trinidadians who are stuck in Barbados because the Trinidad government has taken the position that no one should enter.
Correct.
So this is not an issue of discrimination, because if you want to stop the spread of the virus, and it is scientifically established that most of the persons affected, and certainly the person from Grenada, is Grenadian as I understand it, and someone who came from the UK. How these regulations are phrased is in a sense that if you are Grenadian, you can enter, but if you are a visitor, you can't enter. My own view, and I think I would agree with Jerry on this one, that it should be no one. So wherever you are right now, you stay where you are, because you might be coming from a country that is high risk. And I think the Section 17 of the Constitution empowers the state to declare an emergency, and as this is, and to suspend rights. So I don't think the freedom of movement, Section 12 argument, would be effective there in these circumstances. And if we really can define an emergency, it is now. I mean, we have had no greater emergency that threatens more human lives than this now. So I will agree with that, because I don't think we have the capacity to have Grenadians, just a set of Grenadians coming in and then infecting people, and then we can't help them. That's right. Because we don't have the capacity to help them.
Thank you very much. Ferguson, your government is listening to you, and I'm very grateful for that from both you and Mr. Edwin. I know you are speaking in two capacities here. One, as a lawyer explaining these provisions as you see them, and also as a Grenadian living in Grenada and being concerned in the issues which are raised there. And I'm very grateful for that. Let me say this. The way this is structured, you're quite right. It allows the possibility, and as you see, the possibility is handled in subsection A of the Airports Authority making a decision to allow someone to enter. And the government, this construct allows the government to make a determination on a case-by-case basis. So if it is that we are hearing, and this is the decision of the policymakers, then they will have to make decisions that perhaps will be harsh decisions. But the facility is there to allow on a case-by-case basis for persons to enter. That, of course, will have to be guided on how we gauge the medical authorities, their scientific information, and what information we are getting, as well as taking into consideration the risks that are existing in Grenada and what risks may be brought into Grenada by persons coming in. So I'm hearing both of you. The government is hearing both of you. This is a very important aspect of this conversation. I was very glad to hear your views on this. We all have to remain safe, and we will be taking measures. Before Mr. Ferguson, let me end on this note. Before Mr. Ferguson joined, I was making an important point, which I have stressed at the beginning and somewhere in the middle as well. Let me say this. It is very important that we have this sort of feedback, this response on these regulations, because these are regulations, and it is intended to safeguard the population and Grenada. And so we need to see how these work, and if it is necessary for us to tweak, to amend, to vary any aspect of it, to ensure that we achieve the objective, then rest assured we will be doing that. Yes?
All right, gentlemen, can I break up that fight, a very important fight? Your government is listening. Mr. Ferguson, your government is listening. Mr. Edwin, your government, you want 10 seconds, because we have a caller who's been on the line for the last 5 minutes.
I just want 10 seconds to say that...
Producer, just check to see if that caller is still there.
Right,
10 seconds.
10 seconds. I think our Prime Minister threw his hands up when he said that we should pray. I think this is a situation that does not call for prayer. Prayer evokes a sense of hopelessness and this sense that we have to rely on something else outside of our own agency.
Mr. Edwin, I think this is going to spark a war. So let me ask you to park that one there. Let's take a call.
Thank you.
Thanks for your patience.
Campbell, good night. Cliff Robertson here. How are you? I have a question. Was the Prime Minister's declaration a result of positive tests done on individuals for that virus? If it was, how many of those tests were done? Of that number tested, how many were positive? Because, you see, we're trying to control something, and if you don't have tests and no numbers, you cannot control anything that you cannot count. And we might just be creating a tempest in a teapot.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that interjection. Because we're out of time, we have to keep the calls to like 10 or 15 seconds.
But Ms. Campbell, while we're counting, people may be dropping dead.
Right. Somebody on social media is saying, I think the health minister had said in a previous broadcast that the last plane would come in this evening, and it was supposed to come in empty to take people out, not to bring people in. Somebody is also saying that they're happy to hear the Attorney General say your government is listening. Producer, can you just help us roll the discussion along? Let's look at the restriction on domestic travel, because we've done international travel. So can we look at domestic travel? No person shall offer for hire or seek to travel on any mailboat sailing inter-island except for transport of freight, inter-island private commercial sea transport except with the approval of the Ports Authority. Mr. Ramdani, all Ruggles, who would like to take that? Or is there
anyone?
I would always like to hear my colleagues at the private bar to see how clear this has been made to the public. So I will weigh in on it definitely, but I would defer to Mr. Ferguson perhaps.
Okay,
again, this
because we have another caller.
11, what Section 11 seeks to do is to again restrict gatherings as far as possible, which is the central theme that runs through these regulations. So, for example, what this is saying is that at this point in time, you can't have a boat, for example, that says, let's go to Carriacou or let's go up to the islands to do a tour. That is out. Save and except if you're transporting freight, that's all well and good, but not humans. And secondly, it says, well, even inter-island private commercial sea transport, except with the approval of the Ports Authority. So again, there is some flexibility in terms of allowing the authority, in this case the Ports Authority, to determine whether or not it can happen. But I believe the general theme is that it cannot happen if it will involve a gathering of individuals. However, it can happen if you are basically transporting freight.
Thank you so much, Ruggles. Thanks so much for that. Let's take another caller. Caller, good evening and welcome. Let's try to keep the question or the comment brief. Thanks. Caller, are you there?
Yes, I am here. Good evening, Odette and the rest of the panel. Now, I have a question for you. Why is it that the garage and part shop are not opened? In my view, they are considered very important services to facilitate the motoring public. I consider them to be essential services. As a matter of fact, I think in the USA, they are part of that essential services. Thank you very much for your comments.
Thank you so much.
I guess he's referring, for example, to the tire shop. So I am going to the bank and I blow a tire. Or I'm going to the hospital and I blow a tire. What do? I don't want to park up my vehicle. I want to go to Southern, or the guys in Cherry Hill, or the guys on Central Street in Grenville, or the fellow in Guelph. I want to be able, that's a good point, Mr. Ramdani, something we ought to look at to amend this to include these part services, especially the tire shops. We have such great roads in Grenada, you know?
Right. So let's leave that for Mr. Ramdani's consideration. I'm going to ask the producer to take us to the next slide. Restriction on road traffic.
Yes.
And the restriction on road traffic is something that has caused a lot of discussion. No person shall drive a vehicle on any public or private road for a purpose other than stated in Regulation 579, and I guess that deals with the essential services. And
yes, exactly.
Right?
And going to the banks, and
right.
the grocery stores, and so on. So it's actually not as controversial as one may think at first blush.
Right.
After all, we don't walk to the bank.
So let's go to the slide after this, which says, no person shall offer for hire or seek to travel on any motor omnibus unless there is or would be. No person shall offer for hire or seek to travel on any motor omnibus unless there is or would not be more than one passenger per row in the motor omnibus in a staggered formation. Any hiring, car or taxi unless there is not more than one passenger in the vehicle. Attorney General, would you like to address that?
I thought this was pretty clear. And in keeping with the theme as expressed by my two colleagues at the private bar, the intention of the regulation is to prevent gatherings, is to ensure people don't come into contact with each other, so that what is being done here is that in any bus, any minibus, as we normally say, or omnibus, one person will be in each seat, and they will be staggered, so that one sits at the right on the back seat. The next person on the seat following that will sit on the left, and then the next seat, the person sits on the right, so you're in a Z shape, as it were, and so you are not making contact with any person. Of course, you have to take care of yourself when you enter a bus. You have to ensure that you protect yourself at all times, and you have to continuously make sure that when you're exiting and so on, you're not touching people as you come out. So the drivers will have to be conscious of this. And so we can ensure that this is done in a proper manner. Because if people have to travel to go to the bank, to go to the grocery store, there has to be some facility, some public transportation available. And so this is why this is here. Otherwise, a large part of the population would be without the ability to get to the grocery store, to acquire much necessary staples, groceries, get to the bank, refuel.
But Mr. Attorney General, yeah? Have you created a double-edged sword? Because we've seen, for instance, the Grandans Bus Association discontinuing their services this week, and some of the busmen are saying that with this regulation that you've put in place, it does not make financial sense. So because it's not making financial sense, they are withdrawing their services. They started with the Grandans bus drivers on Monday, and I understand that other areas have joined. A lot of workers were stranded today. But you're saying we don't have, quote unquote, a public bus service as there is in Barbados or Jamaica.
I would say this, that we all need to play our role in a responsible manner. We all need to assist and participate in this process to get us past this moment. The Prime Minister has already said that there will be certain measures taken to assist on the way forward from the various challenges that will be faced by persons. And he has spoken about assistance financially. Now, how that is to be done will be determined by the government in cabinet, and we will hear announcements about this from the Prime Minister. But I would have thought that if you are a commercial bus operator and you're hoping to receive assistance from the government, how do you present yourself and say, look, that instead of earning what I could have earned from 4 passengers or 5 passengers in my bus, I chose to stay home entirely, and I want you to assist me on the way forward. I am hoping that this will be done in a responsible manner. These may be the considerations, or they may not be for the government, but in terms of providing assistance, that will be a matter for cabinet in determining how this is done. But I am now calling on the sitting where I sit, to say to persons that we each have a role to play in this process. We each need to approach that role in a responsible manner. We are in a state of emergency at the moment. Things are not normal. And so, yes, one calls it a double-edged sword. Another person says there's suspension of rights. There is all of this. We are not in normal times, but we are hoping that our brothers and sisters will see the need to act in a responsible manner, to construe these regulations and implement them in a responsible manner. So, and I'm so pleased to have my two colleagues to sit down tonight. It was important for me not to say too much and to let my colleagues explain what these regulations were saying. When necessary, I would say what I needed to say. But it is important that we come together and we take a position to inform, advise, and assist the public to get past this moment. The leaders, we need to lead at this point in time. We need to assist on the way forward.
As we get ready to wrap it up, let's go to the restriction on road traffic as we move speedily along. No person shall drive a vehicle or on any public or private road for a purpose other than stated in the regulation 5, 7, or 9, and that would have done with the exclusions. And point 2 says, Royal Grenada Police Force shall have powers to stop any vehicle and inquire as to the purposes for which the vehicle is being utilized and to arrest anyone found in violation of this restriction. For the purposes of this regulation, vehicle includes a motor vehicle or motorbike. Ruggles, can you see a lot of people coming to you asking for representation because the answer might not suit as a good answer to the policeman, Ruggles? Like to weigh in on this?
Well, again, what I would expect here, because all of this really is a balancing exercise. There are regulations, but there are regulations that ought to be applied in a manner that is not unduly oppressive. So I would not expect the RGPF in a period like this, when everyone is affected, including police officers, to exercise their powers in any abusive or oppressive manner. You may have individuals seeking to do that, but it's normal if you have restrictions on road traffic. It is perfectly normal, and not just normal, but necessary, to have the police from time to time stop vehicles and make inquiries, especially if the traffic seems a bit heavier than it ought to be. And of course, in emergency situations, the police would have special powers, even more than ordinarily available to it, because this ties in with the Emergency Powers Act that we have to make arrests and so. But of course, we are all in this together. We are all trying to play our individual and collective roles as far as possible. And it's important that everybody work with each other to ensure that we achieve the objective. So while there are rules and there are guidelines, at the same time, there ought to be some flexibility that does not defeat the purpose of the regulations on the one hand, but it's an understanding of the period that we're going through. And once we recognize the overall objective, then I think we ought not to have problems. Some countries have had full, I think Bahamas, if I'm not mistaken, I read somewhere that there was a full state of emergency in Barbados with a 24-hour, in Bahamas, sorry, with a 24-hour curfew. This is a limited state of emergency that still allows some flexibility, in my view.
So let's move on to restriction on visitation. And restriction on visitation says, no person shall visit or be permitted to visit any place of quarantine or isolation station, a patient in a hospital or residential care establishment or facility, including an elderly nursing home, a detainee in a prison, notwithstanding subregulation 1B, but subject to the protocol of the hospital. A patient of a hospital may be allowed one visitor per day. Would you like to explain for us what obtains here, Mr. Attorney General?
Ms. Campbell, would you allow me to address very, very briefly the last point made by Mr. Ferguson? To say this much.
Definitely.
To say this much, that the Commissioner of Police in the person of Mr. Edwin Martin has been very is very conscious. I've had discussions with him, and he's very conscious and sensitive to what the role of the RGPF is at this stage. And so, whilst they will be enforcing these regulations, there will be a proper and appropriate approach to this, so that things will be done in a very smooth manner. He's very conscious of that. So, having made that point, let me come on to this. This again is one of those provisions which is very, very clear. You can see clearly where persons are not allowed to go in the forest 1A, B, and C. You can't go to a place where there's a quarantine station or an isolation station. You can't go to a hospital or residential care facilities where elderly persons are being housed. You can't go to the prison. Yes, visit a detainee in prison. And the part about it notwithstanding is that one person will be allowed per day to visit a patient at the hospital. And the reason for that is that this is a health and medical emergency. The medical personnel are on the front line dealing with this issue. And so we need to ensure that the hospital is a place that persons don't turn up unless it is absolutely necessary. You will have persons there and you will want to visit them. The next day somebody else can visit. If there's a family and a number of persons from the family wants to go, persons can attend and visit, but one a day. Again, these are very practical things, and I'm sure that persons will understand the need for us to ensure that there is minimal traveling and minimal interaction, and there is no gatherings, so that we can deal with the present emergency that we are faced with.
All right, let's go finally to penalties. And you have some penalties in place. A person who contravenes or fails to comply with these regulations shall be guilty of an offense, liable on summary conviction to a fine of $1,000 and to imprisonment for 12 months and to forfeiture of any goods or money in respect of which the offense has been committed. Mr. Ferguson, would you like to untie that for us?
Well, it's in the context of an emergency situation, these penalties, I can say, these penalties are very light. Because it means that the maximum fine must not exceed $1,000. It says on summary conviction, that means that it's a summary offense and therefore it can be heard and determined in the magistrate's court. It's not a matter for the High Court before judge and jury. And of course, for speed and everything, that's a better place for it. But it's $1,000 and to imprisonment of 12 months. So it means that it can be both fine and confine, a fine and imprisonment, and to the forfeiture of any goods or money in respect to which the offense has been committed. But it's a relatively light offense in the context of an emergency situation. Well, maximum, because what is reflected here really are maximum penalties, maximum fine, maximum period of imprisonment.
Again, we are listening to you, Mr. Ferguson, and that's a very important point. This offense creating section was taken from the substantive law that empowered these regulations, and that was the maximum stated in the substantive law. So the regulations could not go beyond what was
I noted that. Yes, that's the Emergency Powers Act.
Yes, so Chapter 88 actually sets out this as the maximum. So the regulations could not go beyond. But we are listening to you. We are hearing you. If there's a need for an amendment there to deal with things like this, we will certainly address it. I would suspect that if the offense is an egregious one within the context of what we're trying to achieve here, that perhaps the court would be more willing to, and I noticed the word you used, you said fine and or confine, and then you change it to imprisonment. In the context of what we're dealing with here, you will likely to be imprisoned if it is that you have committed an egregious breach of these regulations. I am sure a judicial officer, a magistrate looking at a case or presiding over a case of this nature will consider the extent of the breach and decide whether or not to impose a fine. And so, you will be fined. So yes, the fine may be a small fine here for some people, but imprisonment of 12 months is no light matter to consider. So there is that. And I guess if you come back again, well, hopefully all of this is finished in 21 days. Hopefully all of this is finished in a short time. Hopefully we get back to normal and we can return to normalcy. I suspect we have come to the end of it, Ms. Campbell, but I will let you do that before I make my closing remarks.
Yes, Mr. Attorney General, somebody is asking whether tire shops and garages can seek permission under 5N to operate, bearing in mind that they have to follow the necessary social distancing guidelines. You had raised the issue of the tire shops, and somebody's following up, Mr. AG, and asking whether they can appeal to your good offices to amend this. Is that a possibility?
Let me say this, that when that point was discussed, you segued into another point quickly, and I didn't get a chance to address it. I'm grateful to address it now. The Commissioner of Police do have a discretion to make exemptions, other exemptions which are not listed there. And so these persons can make a request. I did say at some point certain matters will be considered to be appropriate exemption. This is a matter for the Commissioner, but he will consider all of the right factors. And if it is that we can demonstrate that, I don't see many cars having punctures on the road these days. Everybody has a spare. But I'm sure that the Commissioner can make arrangements for occasions when these accidents or events occur. But it will be a matter
for clarifying the point. Gentlemen, we have run the full gambit of an hour and a half. We are going to have closing comments from each of you, but since Monday there's this photograph that we wanted to share, and I'm going to ask the producer to show that final photograph. It was taken in the United Kingdom, where some residents were finding that people were contravening the lockdown, and they had this photograph asking people to go home. So, Mr. Producer, that final photograph that is there, do you have it? Yes. Go home, idiots. COVID-19. And we have looked at the law. Some people consider it light, but some people consider it significant. And we're starting with our in-house guest.
Yes, well,
for closing comments.
Yes, just quickly, the Caribbean and Grenada being part of the global system, which has clearly failed us, we need to look inward for our cure to this devastating plague. I am concerned that the haste to which our Prime Minister have run to assist the tourism sector, I'm really concerned about that, because if we put our people at the center of this thing, then, for example, the bus drivers, is a guy from Sauters going to drive to St. George's with 5 people? He will not do that. Is a farmer going to go out? I mean, the Prime Minister says $7 million for agriculture, $20 million for tourism. Yet we need a sustainable food policy. It kind of turns the logic on its head. So I think the cabinet needs to go back and look and see, where do we put our people? Not the tourists who brought this thing to us. Let's be clear.
But the Prime Minister did not say he was helping the tourists. He was saying they were going to...
the sector.
But Mr. Edwin...
The sector who doesn't even buy food from Grenadian farmers.
But that is not true. He's saying that they are going to provide support for the 4,000 or 5,000 workers who will be on the breadline. That's what he said.
Not for the hotels.
It's for the hotel sector, and he particularly stressed people who are employed in the sector. And on Monday we had Ross Fielding, 2 officials from the GHT, and they made the point that they will have to terminate these people. When I asked him for a number, he said it ranged between 3,000 and 5,000.
So $20 million. We could do the math on this.
But it wasn't just for the hotel sector. Lord, we opened a can of worms.
Yes,
Edwin, can we continue that?
Yes, we need to continue it, because we have farmers and we have bus drivers. We have the public, we have other workers in Grenada that we really must attend to in this crisis, not just those in the tourism sector. That's all I'm saying.
Thank you so much. I did not rise in defense of anybody. I was just clarifying the point based on what I was told and what I heard come out in the discussion.
Well, they need to be a little bit clearer on that.
Mr. Ferguson, can we have closing comments, and then we'll have closing comments?
Yes. I just want to make 2 brief points. and to, well, first of all, clarify that I find the penalties reasonable and can be described as low, but I'm certainly not advocating for the increase in penalties, because I really believe that the aspect of public education, I think the public understands that we are all in this together. And what we need to do is to have more public education on these regulations, because, ultimately people will comply. Many times people don't know, they wouldn't find it and read it themselves. So programs such as these and other programs in the media can assist in ensuring compliance. So I'm not advocating for more force, but I'm advocating for more education and ultimately more compliance. So that's the first point. And the second point I wish to make, as the AG is on, and that has to do with the courts. No, we have emergency COVID-19 directions given by the Chief Justice, but those directions affect more the High Court. The Magistrates Court, I find some indecisiveness and uncertainty with respect to the Magistrates Court, and we have a much heavier flow in the Magistrates Court than the High Courts. And what I'm proposing, and it's really the Jamaica model, that it be made clear to people that they don't have to come to court, for example, to take adjournments, and just adjourn all matters to a specified date. So, for example, Jamaica says sittings of the court will resume on May 11th, 2020. It says all matters, no matters will be heard between Monday, March 23rd, 2020 and Friday, May 8th, 2020, except emergency matters. No matters will be heard. And I think for litigants and parties out there, people are still calling, lawyers themselves are still asking questions. What's the matter? What's happening with the Magistrates Court? Are matters going on or matters not going on? And I think we need to send a clear message out there, very decisive, that says matters will not be going on until a specified date, save and except emergency matters.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ferguson. The last word is yours, Attorney General Darshan Ramdani.
Thank you very much for that. I will address 3 points. One, very briefly. One is that our conversation tonight, as I understood it, and I believe we achieved to a large extent, was to inform the public and to clarify what these regulations mean. The Prime Minister has made it very, very clear that this is not about politics now. And I would urge Mr. Edwin that he probably needs to be careful that we don't muddy these opportunities we get to inform the public and to make it clear to them what we are dealing with here. We need to ensure that the Grenadian public understands clearly their obligations, their limitations and the restrictions, so we can get past this point as quickly as we can and as safely as we can. The second point relates to what Mr. Ferguson had said just now about the Magistrates Court. Let me assure you, Mr. Ferguson, and the public that I did have conversations. This is a decision which the magistracy, the chief magistrate, along with the other magistrates, will have to take and advise the government, because we could not very well tell the magistracy, except that we have put there that the courts are to be accessible. But the conversation I had with Mr. Teddy St. Louis, the chief magistrate acting today, gave me a clear impression that what you are suggesting is likely to happen. And I do believe that by mid-morning tomorrow, an announcement, notifications will be made, so there will be clarity for lawyers and persons who are attending court on the way forward. So I'm sure that is going to be done very, very shortly. And that will be expressed through the chief magistrate and the magistracy. Yes, so that we, the executive, of course, cannot tell them what to do except insofar as there are rules and regulations that they can work with. Third point is that the government of Grenada is listening. The Attorney General's office is listening. And we are in a fluid process, and we need to be flexible. We need to balance here. This is a balancing exercise. We need to protect the population in Grenada. We need to ensure that we are all safe, whilst at the same time to have a semblance of some degree of normalcy. And I say a semblance of it because this is not normal. These are not normal times. And I'm calling on all of my Grenadian brothers and sisters, let us work together. My office is accessible. If you have suggestions, my colleagues at the bar, the private bar, if you have comments and suggestions, constructive criticisms, please let me have them, and we will work together to ensure that we get this right and that we can get past this period. And I thank you very much for this opportunity. Odette, thank you.
Thank you so much, Attorney General, and thank you so much, Attorney Jerry Edwin.
Being critical is not being political.
Being critical is not being political. That might be the quote of the day. Yes. And Attorney Ruggles Ferguson, we'd like to thank you sincerely for really making the sacrifice. We know that you were in the middle of your lecture. And gentlemen, a special thank you, especially because this was short notice. When this happened today, the team met in a huddle at 3 o'clock and we were debating, can we pull this off tonight? But we felt it was important because we were inundated by a lot of calls. If I have closing words and if I have an appeal, is to ask the Attorney General's office and the Royal Grenada Police Force to please ensure that police officers are adequately informed, because some members of the team here at the GBN and other persons are nervous that they might be going somewhere legitimately, and because of misunderstandings that people could run into trouble with the law. And I would just like the Attorney General to please alert the Royal Grenada Police Force that I need to get home. Please don't block me. Please don't lock me up in a cell. Let them know. Vouch for me, Mr. Attorney General, that I have been at work trying to educate the Grenadians. I'm a little bit nervous because I realize some police officers these days.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, we were very clear in our presentation, and the Commissioner of Police is very, very clear in his duties.
The policeman who is on the street might not have been listening because he's been on duty. So please make a call on my behalf and on behalf of Blossom Alexis Welch, who must be in here by 5 o'clock tomorrow morning. Gentlemen, thank you sincerely.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for having us. Thank you. Good night. Good night, gentlemen. Thank you.
It's working. Yes.
Thank you so much. And to our producers and to Team GBN, we want to say thank you so much.
And Team Grenada, be safe.
Team Grenada, be safe, and let's abide by the regulations. We shall get through this, and we shall be better after this.
Yes.
So long for now. See you again on Monday night for a regular edition of Beyond the Headlines.
Thank you.